Yeah.
Kate will be in here in just a second. I'll get us started. So the way this class goes, it's a traditional, I feel like we're so far apart. Hold on. This is a traditional satsang class. So what's that line? There's a, it's on I Heart Huckabees, there's glass between us, there's glass between us. Literally one of my favorite movies. So anyway, this class is a meditation and true satsang class. So I will talk about the theme of the week. We will chant. We'll definitely be meditating today. Because I don't have the whiteboard to write the chant up, I don't know how long we're going to chant because nobody can have. You might not even know the chant site. No pressure, right? She's like, no, I don't know the chant. But I'm going to get us started and then we'll get rolling. So the TLDR on that, it's a traditional opening chant, from teacher to teacher given throughout time. And the intention is that it sets a sacred space. And so when you come in to sit in satsang with your teacher or teachers, part of the reality is you're like leaving the real world and you're coming to sit at the feet of truth. So basically those mantras are, the first is a mantra invoking Shiva, who is the Lord of Yoga. And then the second one is the Guru mantra, which recognizes the gurus of the Trimurti, the three-part God system, and then also the Guru within. And then the third one is basically like, we as teachers and students take our seats, we acknowledge that those seats we're taking, let those be blessed. So we do that, one, to like get everybody in, right? And then two, it's about honoring the lineage that has come before, the practices and teachers and students that all come before us, who if we didn't have, this wouldn't exist. So this week, the last week of the year, as far as our yoga calendar goes, we've made it to Savitrir. And that's the last deity we'll do. And like before I jump right fully into Savitrir, the sun god before sunrise, there's like a little bit of like breakdown I want to do based on what we've done. Because I think that's like important because we've done this. So through this whole year, we set out a goal of working through the yamas and niyamas. And we've done that. We've studied 12 different deities from the Hindu pantheon. And we've tried to tie all of that together. The reality is, though, even if you spend an entire year learning something, particularly something as broad and vast as yoga, you are not done. So as we came to the last week of the year, I was even thinking like, okay, what are we going to do? And this month we're talking about Ishvara Pranidhan, that idea of surrender to the higher power or to something beyond ourselves. And like, what's the right deity for the last of these things, right? Like, what are we even trying to get clear on? And I came to the fact that it comes back to we're always getting ready to start again. So we're back to Savitrir. And Savitrir is the sun god before sunrise. So it's to me, metaphorically, that's a deity of potential. That's a deity of, if you've ever been up like before the sun, like you're catching a plane, there's something very magical about the half hour before the sun actually rises. There's so much like electricity in the air. It's like incredibly ancient for us as people because I think our ancestors were always like, is the sun not gonna rise someday? You know what I mean? Like, it's so silly and it's like so basic, but like somewhere in our soul, I do think like, I remember having that thought as a kid, like, is the sun gonna rise tomorrow? Oh my God, you know what I mean? Like, it's so silly. But then it does every single day, and it's like, oh my God, we have another day. Or I'm getting to see it. Because there is a reality that like someday the sun won't rise for us as individuals. Come on in! So Savitrir is a deity that's actually not really worshipped much anymore. I like to say he's kind of been depreciated. So like, he was an entity that even pre-Vedas was very important. Because a lot of cultures did a lot of earth-based worship. So we have lots of receipts on earth, like as mother, being a very important deity and entree point to religious experience, weather, storms, the moon, the sun, all of those are really common entry points for like what is beyond us as the human experience. And so Savitrir is pre-Vedas. He's very, very old. So the Vedas are like, some of them are as old as like more than 5,000 years old potentially, because we don't really know, because they're predating written history. For a long time, the Vedas were simply parts of them. If you were a Brahmin, so that's one of the highest classes you could be in the Indian caste system, ancient Indian caste system, you were taught pieces of the Vedas from your teacher. And so humans carried the Vedas around quite literally in their brains and souls, right, for thousands of years. So we don't actually know how old they are because we don't have the written proof at this point to know where they originated. So Savitrir predates even that. So very old. And he, to me, the reason I picked him is this idea of like, we've done an entire year of really in-depth study. We did something that was kind of an experiment, quite frankly. When Shannon had asked me to do this and then asked me to teach the class on it, it was kind of like, okay, like Chrissy Teigen, like scared face. That was like, I was like, is this gonna work? Like, are we gonna make this work? And I think we did. And I also think that like, now we look toward 2020 and we know that there's gonna be even more study, that there's more work to do, that there's ways to re-engage with content and yoga and the practices in another way. So we got to Savitrir. He is golden. Everything about Savitrir is golden. There aren't a ton of receipts on like how he looked necessarily, because again, he predates, he's really the sun. But he's golden, he has golden hair, he's like incredibly beautiful, he is masculine. That's not always true of some of the sun deities throughout time. I think it's Japan that has actually a female sun deity. I can't remember her name, it starts with an A. But he is the sun before sunrise. And then over time, throughout, as the Vedas start to come up and like we get clearer pictures, he transitions sort of into Surya. So there's a period of time where we have Savitrir as the sun before sunrise, and then Surya as the sun himself, as he's arisen. And then that's the deity that's said to ride across the sky in a chariot, much like you see in like Greek and Roman mythology, that same idea. So there's a time where that's overlapping, and then after a while, Savitrir kind of disappears. There's no more talk of him, he just kind of gets like sunset, literally sunset, and goodbye Savitrir, and then we go exclusively to Surya. Even Surya, over time, kind of gets put on the back burner to go towards the Trimurti. And what I think is interesting about Savitrir is the idea that human religions are consistently evolving. Human belief structures are consistently evolving. There are pieces of them that get morphed into different things. Like we're looking at Christmas right now, like whether you're someone who believes certain things about Christmas or not, there are absolutely unequivocally practices that are part of the Christmas tradition that came from much, much earlier religions, much more ancient practices. And so I think Savitrir is, again, in context, a really interesting idea of how pieces of Savitrir were taken, has transformed into something else, and then as part of this evolutionary process of how we engage with fundamentally the world around us. And honestly, at the end of the day, really our own mortality, because that's what religion is really about. Right? We're seeking a meaning and a connection point for why are we here? Why do we exist? Why, out of all of the weird miracles and flukes that have brought us to this planet, why are we even in existence? And so I think that's a really interesting part of like Savitrir as a metaphor also. But yeah, there's not a ton of information about him. Surya shows up in the Vedas, and then Savitrir goes goodbye. There is a female version of Savitrir, and that's Savitri. So this is where it gets really confusing too. So you have Savitrir, So it's Savitr, and then Savitrir, which we actually wrote about on the board, so it's fine. But they're supposed to be like God and goddess together. There's a lot of times in, especially the philosophies that you have consorts, or you have like parts. You have the parts of the whole. Savitri and Savitrir are not excused from that. So there's also that entity too. So sometimes if you Google Savitri, you're like, who's Savitri and what's up with that? Any questions about that part?
So wait, how does she play into the story?
She is just his consort. I mean, I hate to say this, like, because there's so little information about Savitrir, I mean, it's just like, this is his wife. She sits here and is quiet. Like, there's just not a ton of information about her. But Surya has a consort, I think. I can't remember, I don't study him a ton, but Surya has a consort. But like, most of them do. And next year, we're really gonna talk about the interplay between the deity and their consort. So every quarter you start with the deity, the main deity, and then you talk about his, most of the time, wife. So that's always interesting too, because they usually come, or they should come in pairs. We should be talking about the ladies just as much as the gentlemen. So that brings us to the reason I wanted to bring up Gayatri. So in Vedanta, one of the most famous and most repeated mantras throughout history is the Gayatri mantra. It's ancient, it's very old. It's used to be a mantra to Surya. So the story that I've learned about the Gayatri, although there's not one single story because it's an oral history, everything gets, telephoned throughout time, is that the Gayatri itself is the goddess, Savitri, singing to her love, Savitrir, to rise again in the morning. And I love that story because that plays very well into like the non-dualistic philosophy that I study, right? So it's like the whole idea of Shakti's job is to create the catalytic moment for Shiva to appear as consciousness. So I love the idea that the Gayatri mantra is the goddess, Shakti, calling to her lover, I need you to arise, I need you to appear, I need you to do your job. Like, I mean, lovingly, she's being real nice about it, it's very beautiful. But she's like, I need you to get up in the morning, I need you to do the thing, the universe needs you to do your work, you need to appear.
But why they need to have God after sunrise and then before the sunrise?
Oh, well, I don't think they needed to. It's the reason you have both is because Savitrir he stopped being worshipped, basically. So he was a god. Savitrir was the sun god, and the sun was worshipped. And that's where like this comes from, because it's you're asking the sun to come back. Then Savitrir kind of got depreciated in lieu of Surya. As often happens in human religions and mythology, you kind of make up a story at some point on why one thing went away and one thing came back, right? You see this, I'm trying to think of another example of this. There were examples of this in Western mythologies too, like Greek and Roman mythology, where an older version, like Demeter was a very important goddess for a very long time, and then she got depreciated because of the patriarchy, and then Zeus became the more important. Inanna was incredibly important as the mother, but she got depreciated in lieu of a different god. So it's not really that you needed both, it's that Savitrir came first, got depreciated, and they had to sort of make up a story at some point on where he was going, so that then you could move people to Surya. Does that make sense?
How does that happen in oral history that as you said, that one just completely disappears? We stop telling that story. Like, how does that happen?
I mean, I don't think there's one answer.
Okay.
And I'm certainly, like, I know a lot about comparative religions, I don't know everything. This happened, so if you've ever seen Philip, okay, I'm gonna go on a real sidebar tangent, but I promise it's relevant. Philip Glass did an opera about Akhenaten, the Egyptian pharaoh, who decided that a multi-god system was not how we were gonna do it anymore. And he decided that all of Egypt, all of that like important, super crucial part of the world at that time, was gonna get rid of the multi-god system, which they'd had for a very long time, and which had fundamentally empowered him to be pharaoh, which is, I mean, that's a big deal. He basically sunset that and said, we're going to worship the sun as Aten instead. And he made that the edict of the land. I think that's a really solid example of how this happened. There's also the reality that, you know, different groups come into power, right? I think we see that from the move from paganism to Abrahamic religions in Greece and Rome and in like Alexandria. If another group comes into power, their rule is going to be the rule. In order to placate the people who are having their religion sort of sunset a little bit, I'm trying to be very like politically correct about this, they absorb different rituals into the calendar so that then people can still celebrate.
So this is colonialism.
This isn't literally, I mean,
I mean, not this thing, but in what you're
sometimes,
saying, coming and taking over.
In the case of Greece and Rome, it wasn't. I mean, they were all the same people. So like in Greece and Rome, what happened, people were tired of kind of the brutality and the weirdness of Rome. You know what I mean? And so they just said like, okay, we know you really love Saturnalia and we know you really love these holidays. We're just going to take those, put them in the Christian calendar and absorb some of the practices. Mm-hmm. So, and that's sort of like a marketing scheme, really. It's like, look, we still do the fun stuff you like. We're just not doing it with your gods. So I think some of it's just that. This stuff is so old, it's really not colonialism. Although the same ideas I think that do tie into colonialism, like I would be remiss in saying that a lot of times religious shifts, they are related to who's fighting with who's taking over who's in power, what tribes or groups have like risen, how are people migrating. All of that has impacts on where deities go. Yeah. I mean, Celtic religions has this also, right? You had a really, really solid base of like Celtic mythology and religious structure. The Vikings had like gods in mythology, and that all just sort of got depreciated. You keep some rituals. You see some rituals that are very old that still show up, but they've been absorbed into something else. I think this Savitrir in particular, I just find so interesting because it's one of them that didn't get depreciated so badly. Like, what ended up happening with Akhenaten, just as a sidebar, like, it's really funny. It's worth listening to the opera. It's a really good opera. But the point is like, he's like, no, we're going to worship the sun. And I'm best friends with the sun. And there's like this whole like song about him singing to the sun. And it's really beautiful. And then everybody gets super mad at him. And they basically murder him and his whole family. And they're like, the gods are back. And they get rid of the sun. So like stuff like that is how our religions have absolutely evolved. Mm-hmm. So Savitrir, I don't think was that dramatic. I just think it happened over time. Sometimes it's just what's popular.
Yeah.
You know?
Religion just a tool of human.
Yeah. Yes. It's a tool of our history. It's a tool of how we view ourselves. It's a tool for crowd control, frankly. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's supposed to be all of those things.
Yeah.
And so, yes, like sometimes things get put away or canceled, like TV shows, quite frankly, because they're not relevant anymore to what the market that we're trying to serve. And so I think for whatever reason, this, as more stuff got written down, as society got big, again, this too, like, I don't think we should ever underestimate the power of, and I say this with total kindness, religion is not just crowd control, but there are big pieces of it that are, because it's giving you an identity and a role and meaning in a society with structure. It's super important. As the cities or lands get bigger and more complicated, sometimes your religion can't manage it. So it's almost like sometimes you move from something very simple, earth goddess, sun god, very simple, to something more complicated to support the society as it evolves. I don't think it's always bad. That's the other thing too, is it's not always a bad thing. Now, when you get on boats and murder a bunch of people on another land, killing their gods, that's a bad idea. That's generally pretty bad. That's not the way, but that's not how this happens by any stretch of the means. I also think, and this is like my literal opinion now, but I think there is some elegance to the way our belief structures evolve as we get more sophisticated. And I think that's important too. So Savitrir was incredibly simple. We're simply worshiping the sun as he arises every day.
But how is the sun before the sunrise not just as important as the sun as it's crossing the sky?
They basically morphed into the same deity. So Savitrir morphed into Surya.
So Surya also characterizes
Sure, yes,
before
exactly.
and
Exactly, but what's interesting is Surya is not nearly as important anymore as Vishnu or Shiva. So again, like we have this line of like, now, are there, that you can literally trace the path of like Shiva. You could theoretically trace the path of Shiva and all of his, what he is and what he represents through like Savitrir, Surya, Indra, then Shiva. Like you can watch how this happens in other religions too. It's just kind of how we work.
so is there a hope or in history that as it hopefully it repeats itself so that Surya will come back in importance?
That's a good question. I think what's a more interesting question is what do we learn about ourselves and our relationship to our religions when we see the facts of how religion works.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? Like to me, the more important question is if I know that this belief structure that I love deeply and with my whole heart has a history and it isn't perfect and it's a little weird sometimes, right? And maybe it's not gospel, how can I then consciously engage with it in a way that's even more loving or even more devotional? So I think that's the real lesson. Because I think you can sit here and say, okay, let's even take this out of the context of India. We know Jesus was probably not born on December 21st. Jesus of Nazareth, spoiler children, was not born in December. Like we know this. We also know that Rome had particular festivals that would have been helpful at this time of year for morale and all sorts of other things. Does that make our celebrations, even as Christians or not as Christians, less valuable? No. And I think that's the point. And I think it's putting us in context of the entire spectrum of humanity that is valuable. Like it is cool to think that like we've gone from very simple nature worship to complex gods with access points for us to see ourselves within, and possibly still coming back to the idea of like, let's worship the sun and the earth because they support us because we're burning them up. Like, I think that's an interesting way to think about it. Mm-hmm. I think what gets us all in trouble, no matter where we come from, is all of it being gospel and inflexible. I think that's the death sentence for everyone, in my opinion. And I mean, folks might be arguing that. But I mean, I think that's interesting because then that's way more unifying than saying my religion has to look like this. Yeah. Surya is dead. Surya, bye Surya. You know what I mean? Oh, he was here. He's kind of been depreciated, but I see the threads of Surya and Shiva or Vishnu or whomever. I think that's.
And I guess that's what I mean by it coming full circle back around, that we can still see Surya as important as a component of.
And I mean, who's to say? I mean, people, the other thing about religion that's so interesting is people have never stopped practicing ancient religions. It's the reason we still know about, like, I mean, despite every effort, paganism as a big bucket of things has never been eradicated, right? Because people continue to practice it. So I think he probably does have people that are like following him. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's probably real. Mm-hmm. The goal is, at least for me, it's like, it's all the same thing. Yeah. And I don't say that in a bypassing way. I say that in a very conscious way. It's all the same thing. I can celebrate Christmas because it's about family and it's about connection and it's about the opportunity for redemption if I feel like I've missed the opportunity on something, even if I don't associate it with like Christianity. Mm-hmm. And that's what it is for me. I think it's that mentality that's actually helpful for everyone. So like Surya, he had a weird journey and now he's gone and that's cool, right? Like that's cool. Yeah. Any other questions? That was a good question.
Yoga religion? I don't think yoga is.
Yoga in and of itself is not a religion. Yoga is more like,
it's complementary.
It's complementary.
Your spiritual practice.
I would even, well, it depends on what you're talking about as yoga too, because like yoga asana practice isn't really religious. However, it could be part of, if like somebody who practices like Trikashaivism, my yoga by definition is sitting and meditating, and that is part of my religious experience. So it really depends. It really depends.
Asking for a friend, what's Trikashaivism?
So Trikashaivism is non-dualistic, Shiva-centric philosophy, worldview, religion.
Got it.
The other thing too is like the idea of what's a religion versus what's a philosophy get really muddy really quick. And that's really a very personal relationship. Mm-hmm. Because you could be a yoga philosopher and be an atheist. And that would really not be you would have to be in a very particular area. Like you couldn't be you wouldn't be a Gita follower probably, because that's really all about devotion to God. But you could definitely practice yoga and read quite a few yogic texts and be an atheist. Those aren't necessarily incompatible. Yoga specifically. That's not the way it's ever manifested for me. But you could do that. You could also be an agnostic. I mean, I talk about Carl Sagan all the time, but I always say that he didn't know he was a non-dualistic yoga philosopher, because what he said about science was very much in the same vein as that. He just didn't know it. And he labeled himself as an agnostic, for sure. Wrote an entire book about how he's an agnostic. So we have receipts that he was very clear on
where he stood.
It was very clear. We are not even speculating. He literally knew. But yeah, but also, I'll offer this. Is anything a religion? If you don't believe in it?
I thought religion is more about worshiping certain.
Sure, it is.
You believe that.
Yes, absolutely.
But
I guess my question is, if the reason Savitrir isn't part of a religious structure is no one currently worships him anymore. Does that make it a religion anymore? This is I'm being very dramatic and chicken and egg situation on purpose, but for a religion to be a religion versus a philosophy, the catalyst is devotion. It's Ishvara Pranidhana. Otherwise, it's just mythology and stories. Why do we call Greek and Roman mythology and not religion? Because we've timed out on it. Because nobody worships that way anymore. So, if we come back in 200 years because Elon Musk has figured out cryogenic freezing. You know what I mean? The way we're going, we could see a lot of things completely wiped out. And then, so it's the question of, are they religions anymore? Was Greco-Roman paganism, was that a religion? Yeah, it was at the time. It's definitely not anymore. They call it all mythology. It's all mythology now. The point is, which is very helpful actually, so thank you, it's Ishvara Pranidhana is the game changer. That devotion to a higher power is what makes something have value. Mm-hmm. You're standing for Savitrir because there is a desire to worship. You know what I mean? That's the sticky thing. That's the most important thing. And none of that's required, and that's really a choice.
So, okay, why does yoga seem or tend to be more linked to certain spiritual or religious practices than others?
It's cultural, for sure. Probably. It's just trying to think of an example outside of it in a different religion. It's cultural. So yoga, Western religions didn't take the body. So if we're talking about modern postural yoga, which is what I assume is what we're talking about really, and probably some meditation. Because of the cultural framework that yoga came up in, body, mind, and soul aren't separate. Ayurveda is a sister science to yoga, is a sister science to the philosophies and religions. Because their worldview was that everything is in the same structure. Western beliefs about the body are the body is the space of sin, not right or wrong, right? But the body is a sitting place. In order to heal the body, we have to basically exercise your sin. right? So not now, but like in over time,
Talk
right?
to me about the exercising your sin.
Well, like
I just want you to say
I mean,
more
we were
about it.
just talking about Outlander. I mean, the whole thing is like that kid poisoned himself, and the priest is like, "You have the devil in you." I mean, it was like the whole thing. So like for a long time, that was like if you were super like you had
Not
cancer.
like exercising.
No, I
You're
mean
saying,
like
cast it out.
cast the sin out of your
Yeah.
body. No, like if you had cancer, which we all know now, cancer is just some cells that went rogue. I mean, that's literally cancer, right? Just multiplied badly. They thought you had the devil in you, or that you'd been cursed, or you'd been hexed, or like a witch got you. So like I mean, like literally, like who was it? One of the queen when she died. One was it maybe Queen Elizabeth? It was somebody in the Elizabethan time, or maybe like King Henry VIII had. Oh no, it was Jane Seymour when she died. So Jane Seymour clearly died from childbed fever. Like she had a baby, it went badly, she died. She got infection. Supposedly they did an autopsy and they said her heart was black, and then the ghost of Anne Boleyn must have like tried to hex. I mean, this is nonsense, right? Like this is actual hot nonsense. But the point was, religion is taking a very separate view of the body, whereas this practice says the spiritual maintenance of your body is crucial.
They can't be unwoven.
They're all the same. It's all property. It's all Purusha. It's all part of the process. Those are very different worldviews.
Yeah.
So yoga as a modern postural practice is very deeply related to the spiritual aspect for a couple of reasons. One, because we're white people, not fully in a culture, probably picking and choosing what we like. Problem one. Problem two is that they take a just drastically different view of the body. So yoga can be spiritual because it's all in service to your growth, to prepare you to meditate, or to prepare you for satsang, or to prepare you for time at the temple, or fire ceremony, or whatever it is that you're doing. There's not a lot of spaces in like Western religions where we said like, let's go work out really hard so that we can sit on and pray.
Yeah.
You just sat and prayed. Like, you know what I mean? That's the difference. So I think that's the equivalent of what yoga is doing.
Got it. That helps.
Yeah, I mean, this also too, it's like comparative religions, you come from a cultural baseline, like the cultural baseline's different. But yeah, I mean, that's why. That's mostly why. Not exclusively, but mostly. Also, like, when you don't grow up in a culture, your worldview is different. That's why view orientation is so important, because you don't know, you have to work much harder to orient to the view because you don't have the cultural conditioning through years of growing up in a culture to understand it. That's the other part of it. I think that's pretty.
Would put you sometimes at an advantage, but also at a disadvantage.
It can put you at an advantage in the sense that like people who convert to religions are often incredibly devoted because they're choosing it. I think there's some power to that.
Yeah.
As a general, it doesn't even matter for who. That's any religion.
Yeah.
If you convert to Wiccan paganism, you chose it. That's important. I think if you grow up in something culturally, the tendency for that to happen is less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I know a lot of people that were like pushed into Catholicism, no drag on Catholicism, I'm half Catholic, and then now have a real problem with it because they didn't choose it. So I think the choice is important. That's my hot take on that part though.
It's a good hot take.
The point is, connect with things that matter to you. Connect with what helps you grow no matter what. And the thing too is like, any religion has something to teach you. Literally any. And you can be an atheist to take great lessons away from the teachings of religion in context. Because let's say you are an atheist or an agnostic and you don't believe any of it's anything but stories. There's still parables are valuable. Mythology is valuable. Human history is valuable. So, you take it that way too. And that's bigger than even just Savitrir and yoga. So.
Love it. So tell me more about this song and
Yeah.
I don't want to be like translate it for me, but I also want to be like
so Gayatri, we're gonna chant Gayatri. We won't meditate very long. We will chant Gayatri, and it could just be me chanting it because I don't have the board. But if you know it, sing along. What I love about Gayatri is I do think that even if you don't know it, it comes really easily. Like there's something about Gayatri because it's so old. It's the oldest mantra or prayer in human history that's been continuously practiced for this. It's literally thousands of years old. And so what's cool about Gayatri that I've always observed whenever I've changed it with people is people pick it up very quickly. It's almost like it's in our human DNA, which is weird. It's like we know it. So Gayatri is you're asking illumination to come. And I frame it in the sense of like the goddess speaking to the god to arise, but really the goddess and God are ourselves. Like we're calling to our best self to show up, and a best self in like the most illuminated or the least ignorant. That self to come forward because that's who we want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a mantra that's asking all of us to say, let's be our best selves. Let's shine. Let's be a beacon for each other in the sky, and let's look out for each other, and like let's call to each other. And it's a love song. It's very much a song of like love. So I'll sing it. Kirtan works in call and response, but the only version of Gayatri I know puts Gayatri in one whole like chant line. So if you know it, great. If you don't know it, don't worry about it. I will chant it for as much time as we have. So take a big full belly breath in. Exhale out. And take a big deep breath in. And a big exhale out. And just give yourself a second to let the mantra resonate. Like whether you sang it or not, doesn't matter. Just notice how you feel. One of my favorite parts of these practices is that they are so old. And every time a human throughout history has sung the Gayatri or participated in an Agnihotra, doing something that humans have been consistently doing for thousands of years. We're connecting to every human that ever was, connecting to every teacher and every student. And the purpose of lineage and religion in its best sense is to connect us to that. It's to connect us to the reality that we are actually more alike than we are different. And that we ourselves imbue the sense of the sacred into the acts that we do. And at the end of the day, that itself is Ishvara Pranidhana. It's the act of devotion, it's the act of adding value and power to the rituals we have. So take 2 more breaths in, filling up belly to chest. Imagine the breath going all the way down the tailbone. And then exhale out, watch the breath go back out in reverse. Last one, inhale in, fill up, belly to chest. And exhale out. I'll close class today the way I always close class, and it's to ask you to think of one thing today you're grateful for. It could be big or small, serious or silly, it doesn't matter as long as you're so little grateful for it. And when you know what that thing is, bring your hands together in Anjali Mudra over your heart and hold that thing and your gratitude and love for it in between your palms. I am so grateful for the practice of yoga, and I am so grateful for each of you coming here today to share your practice with me. Namaste in its simplest form means the light within me sees and humbly bows to the light within you. Dropping the chin towards the chest, bringing the thumbs to the third eye center, and bowing forward to sit your practice. Namaste.
Namaste.
Great job, everybody. Thanks for coming. Hey.
The honoring will continue in 2020. We will be doing, okay, bye everybody on the internet.